Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the very, very first London Network Automation Meetup. I'm very glad that you could make it. We've got a very good turnout. And let's get started. So we are going to have 3 presentations today. Chris is going to start, a manager. Then I'm going to talk about... no, my manager's manager. So just let's be specific here. I'm going to follow him and talk about myths and doubts that I have and I come across and I hear, and how to mitigate them. Well, late arrivals, please come in if you want. No, you don't want to come in. That's fine. And Mircea is going to talk about event-driven automation as the 3rd presenter. I would like to say thank you to Chris and Mircea for being part of this event tonight. Also, I would like to say a huge thank you for Cloudflare because they let us in, they organized food, they protect us from the rain today. So thank you, Cloudflare. It's really great that you let us here. And we are on a meetup today. And my story is, when I came to London about 5.5 years ago, I joined a great company. They're really great people. Some of them are here, actually. And everybody was really network focused, really uber geek, top of their game. But I wanted to go and meet other people outside work and talk about network stuff. Not that they were not cool, no, not because of that. And I looked at the meetup.com website and was looking for network-related events, and I found nothing. Like, yeah, fine, okay. Then I may go to some coders things, but I didn't know anything too much of it at that time. And I found like I'm an outsider on those events. And recently, I was interested in network automation. So let's see what Meetup.com can offer to us in this area. And in London, I found nothing. And I said, screw it, let's do it. Let's just do one. And let's just start, because I'm not the only one who is interested in this and want to be started or want to meet other people who are actually interested. But I also found lots of DevOps-related meeting. And if we want to be honest, network automation is part of DevOps, the DevOps phenomenon today. So I went to a couple of DevOps meetings, and they were really interesting. Some of the things that I hear there, I can apply to networks. So it's a good way to learn. So if you are interested and you can't make this event, then you can go to DevOps meetups and speak to those people. Interesting experience, a very good experience. So as you can see, there's a great selection of DevOps meetups. There's more than 3,000 meetups over the world and more than 1.2 million members. I looked up network automation as well. I found 13 meetups. And if you actually go and look at those meetups, those are puppet meetup, but they ticked network automation. It's just, nah, okay. And there was other unrelated ones. Actually, it was 7 that was purely network automation. 3 of them in the US, Silicon Valley, that sort of places. But this is us. So thank you for being part of that. Yes, so I'm going to hand over the microphone to Chris, who's going to talk about what the managers thinks about this thing.
Hi, everyone. Again, thanks to Cloudflare for letting us be here. So I've been in the network space for longer than I really care to admit. My first LAN was 4 megabit token ring, which I don't think anybody here will remember. So the man at the back does, fantastic. And my first wide area network was on a BT killer stream, which was 64K, which at the time was kicking. So I've kind of done it all. I've managed, I've been a techie, I've designed. The great thing about becoming a manager is you can be the thickest man in the room, and I probably am. So when Csilla said, look, come and talk about network automation, I really wanted to put my spin on what I think network automation is for, and more importantly, what it's not for. I currently look after a network for a service provider, which is a global service provider. But I was enterprise for a long time, and I asked a couple of people this question earlier around working for an enterprise. What do they think of automation? And Someone said it was a black art. It's a black. Thank you. Yeah, it's a black box. That is true in the service provider space as well as in the enterprise space. But the real win for this is going to be in the enterprises over the next 5 years. So let's get into this. So what does automation mean to me? This doesn't make it right. This doesn't make it wrong. This is just what I think of automation and what it brings to my assignment right now. Automation is not something you buy off the shelf. Lots of vendors want to sell you a package. I don't think automation is something you can buy. You can get packages that will deliver parts of an automated solution, but it will not give you an end-to-end solution. It is not SDN. I will bitch about SDN later. It is not NFV. What it should be is open. The reason it should be open is because it means people can come into the organization and pick up the skills that you've already used to deploy the code quickly. As a leader or as someone that's accountable to a business for a network, reducing human touch points on network config is really important because humans mess up. We've all done a 3 o'clock deployment and fat-fingered and then taken something offline. Automation should avoid that. And it also gives you repeatable, consistent results. One of Chilla's favorite sayings is, if you have to do something more than once, automate it. That is so true. And that's something we're keen to get going in our current organization. Bit of history. I like history. Anyone here from Cisco? No? Great, I can slag off Cisco. So 10 years ago, enterprises bought Cisco. Why did they buy Cisco? Why was Cisco so dominant for so long? Because you bought a Cisco phone, you plugged it into your Cisco switch, you fired up Cisco Prime, and your network was there. There was a degree of automation. Things plugged in, it was a fully interoperable suite, it was easy. And hey, you could get yourself a CCNA, a CCNP, there was a part there for your techie staff. It was great. It was a safe bet. Organizations knew who Cisco were. They sponsored golf tournaments. It was a great investment. Then we had a bit of a problem in 2008 when basically the financial world fell off a cliff, and organizations started looking at value versus cost. An enterprise network is a fairly dumb thing. 9 times out of 10, series of VLANs, maybe some firewalls, maybe some application support at the front end via something like an F5, but pretty straightforward. And yet it was costing quite a lot of money. So if you look back to just after the financial crash, you had a series of technologies that had been there for yonks beforehand. They had existed, some of them for decades before the financial crash. But SDN there in the corner was 2011. It was formally formalized, the SDN community. They all came out of people saying there must be a better way of doing this. I want to talk about SDN very quickly. SDN has become one of my things to kick. I found this quote on LinkedIn only a couple of weeks ago, and it's become one of my favorite quotes because it really captures for me where the blur between automation and SDN kind of happens. People talk about SDN when they mean automation, and people talk automation when they mean SDN. And for me, the pinnacle of it going wrong by marketing is people saying, we sell SDN networks. What do you mean you sell SDN networks? What does that mean? You mean you're decoupling the data plane and the control plane? That's great. Or do you mean you've actually found a marketing term that you want to push to punters to buy because you're trying to reinvent the legacy model? Automation is not SDN. Features of it sit in the SDN world, and SDN will live on, but it does need to mature. It's become, as I said in the slides there, it's a really misused term. Many organizations use it and kick it around as a great marketing term, but it's not there yet. It's not a blue pill. SDN does some great things, but it doesn't fully automate your network, and it doesn't solve all the problems. So why do we need to automate? Speed is the obvious one. Let's touch multiple devices quickly. If I can write one code to deploy a series of solutions across a number of devices globally with a few commands, fantastic, let's do that. It cuts down on repetitive tasks, straightforward things. We were on a call earlier around changing NTP over 600 devices. It's a script. It's automation. It's really easy. How do we do it today? Oh yeah, the guys log in and do it by hand. 600 devices. They get everyone right every time? I don't think so. So you get consistency. You get the same results. If you've done your prep right, if you've got the right framework in place, you're going to get the same result from your script every time. It becomes a known touch point. And for me, it reduces risk. One of the scariest things I hear is from network engineers, and I've worked with network engineers for a long time, and they tend to fall into two camps: the really crazy and the alcohol-induced crazy. My favorite thing is, oh, I'm doing a change control at 3 o'clock tomorrow morning. I'll be fine. Really, I'm not at all worried, especially when you're doing something quite substantial. So if you set up your framework right and you're looking at automation, you can de-risk a lot of the things you do. A lot of changes at 3 in the morning, those they are repetitive. They're the same thing. You should do them over and over. You do them at 3 in the morning because you don't want to impact customers. Let's take that to another level. Let's sandbox that. Let's get a script and let's do it in a more predictable way that reduces the blast radius should something go wrong. And last of all, it avoids that cowboy config moment. Anyone here that's done any sort of work on CMDBs or asset management, how many interfaces in your network are described correctly? Not that many, a really low percentage. It's human nature. We want to do things faster. We want to get things done in a hurry. Sometimes people just don't care. Avoiding that moment, for me, is a real win from automation. And in the last couple of years working for a service provider, it's been an interesting journey. Service provider, my current assignment, they say, we're going to have a set of products. We only sell these products, but we want to be closer to our customer. We want to give the customer what they want. Well, that doesn't really work. You can't have a set series of products that you can't customize, but you want to be close to your customer. So you have to do both. So bespoke solutions, they're there. They're not going to go away. You have to develop bespoke solutions for customers. Network engineers suck at documentation. If you give them Visio, they'll happily draw you any number of pretty pictures. But if you ask them to document and explain why they used a certain level of code or they used a certain command, it doesn't really interest them, so they don't do it. Likewise, troubleshooting undocumented networks sucks even more, because if it is 3 in the morning and your customer's gone down and there's a guy in Silicon Valley trying to support something that a guy in Australia deployed 2 days previously, and there's no documentation, that's a tough place to be. No one wants to be in that situation, but it happens. By using automation to push out those repeatable configs, you are self-documenting the network. The script is the document. So reverse engineering, easy. Understanding what the guys did, easy. Again, if you've done it in the right framework, you'll actually see which codes have been pushed. So you'll be able to reverse engineer what the engineers have done, hopefully. And you can repeat complex solutions for customers. We get in my current role, we get a lot of complex solutions that we do once, and they're great, they're fantastic. But the engineer that did it has then had a beer. He's forgotten how he did it. He's forgotten why he did it, and of course he hasn't documented it. By having it as a script, by doing it in an automated way, it's repeatable. So you can lift that code, you can move it to another metro, you can move it to another location, and hey presto, you're maximizing the return on investment on your network. For me, right now, that's a real win. There's a joke in that slide, and it isn't a picture. What does this mean for network engineers? How many people here are like CCNP, CCNA, genuine network engineers? Okay. How many of you have done automation before? This is an automation meetup, so I should have expected that number. How many of your colleagues would you say you get a high number of people doing it or a low number? Yeah, I think it's a low number. A lot of engineers, they've been doing the CLI route for so long now, they don't know how to change. And this is scary, right? And I know Chilla's presentation is going to touch upon this. This is really scary. This is a new way of doing things. It's programming, which is the joke, by the way, because you're not programmers anymore, you're developers. It doesn't mean that at all. What it means is that the technology that you have been touching for the last 20 years has changed. We are looking at white box switches. We are looking at, SDN is there. We are looking at a different way of working, and engineers need to evolve. I know Csilla will disagree with me. She'll say that developers will learn networking. I don't have any belief that will ever happen. I know. So for me, this is the right way to go. Whether you're an enterprise, whether you're a service provider, most service providers, I think, are probably already doing this, or certainly thinking about it. The interesting thing is, for those of you that work for enterprises, you need to be doing this too, because it's going to make your lives easier in the long run, and it's going to future-proof you to a degree. No job is permanent, but setting at the CLI, that's not going to be there in 5 years' time. It's going to change. Questions? Good code.
Yeah, but that's kind of the problem. Yeah, that's kind of the problem, though. You need a process for good code then, because
yes, you need a good framework.
I've seen plenty of like silly Perl one-liners that are far from self-documenting.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think you can insist on code being self-documenting, but you will still need some form of process for the network engineers to follow.
So I agree, and for me, that's peer review. It's a good framework for developing the code in the first place, but it's that peer review moment. And I totally get what you mean about the dodgy one-liners. That's as bad as the cowboy coders on exactly. CLI.
Yeah.
You need peer review.
Right. Yeah. That's what I was getting at. Thanks.
Any others? I'm not very good with this microphone, Lark, am
Hi.
I?
About the network engineers, you said, a lot of network engineers will just say, look, yeah, I'm just used with CLI. How do you approach someone that, because I had this in mind just before you said it, you come up with a code and then you go to someone and say, look, next time if you want to automate this, push it to about 300 devices, you can use this. Yeah, no, we're just going to do it the old way.
So I kind of agree, but I think there's probably some steps in between. There's probably some development feedback for the engineer initially. But do you want somebody?
No, I'm the engineer who designs the solution, and you just have to give it to someone to implement it, and you don't want that person to spend 8 months just pushing out configs to NTP servers.
Depends on the organization. I know what you mean, but I think, I don't want to go. I know Chilla's going to touch upon the journey. When you manage people, you can't. You do reach a point where you have to say, if you're not willing to learn a skill, what is your relevance to the organization? That's really what you're saying. Is if they're not doing what you need them to do, that's a pretty strong message. There are many steps in between that, but you do have to. You have to decide if you're going to go down this route with a network. You can't do it piecemeal. You have to decide. You have to build a framework. You have to have a model before you jump in. But then you are jumping in, and you can't have somebody on the CLI while somebody else is using scripts, because that's the worst place to be. You need that configuration standardization that you won't get if people are touching the CLI. So I think I've got people working for me right now that I think, in 5 years' time, how relevant will you be unless you're willing to change and get out of your box? We're in IT. It always amazes me. We're in IT. Nothing stays the same. We should all be moving. It might.
How do you encourage that ethos for your engineers? Because do you encourage that in their working environment, or do you encourage them to do that out loud? Most people feel to do that in their own spare time.
Yep.
They're an individual that has that mindset to go away and do that, right?
Yep.
There are some people that are generally 9 to 5 and don't want to do that. So as an employer, surely you've got to be in a position to encourage that, so that you don't get into these operational positions, and you don't get into where you're saying, you know what?
Yep.
It's easier to do this, but if you're not encouraging that mindset, then that's very difficult to achieve.
So the point I made about there are several steps before that. You adopt a framework. You're going to go down a different route for running the network. You have to have people on board. Now, that starts in hours. That is, what are our options here? What interests you as an engineer? And if let's be clear, there are people that say, I like to come in, log on to the CLI, and that's it. But that's great. We're not on that path anymore. It's the same as if you change your back end database stack. If someone doesn't want to learn that environment, they're not going to be relevant. And for me, I know there are people out there that are stuck in their ways, right? We've all worked with people like that before. But for me, it is that excitement when you adopt something new. That's kind of cool and sexy. I want to do that, and I want to get my people to do that. And that's an enthusiasm thing. And once you've got 2 or 3 key players, it does build momentum. There will always be difficult corner cases. Any others? No? Cool. Thank you. Your turn.
Thank you, Chris. I think this topic in itself could be good for a presentation or a roundtable discussion itself, because as many companies out there and as many engineers out there, everybody's got their own way of thinking. So if you up for it afterwards, we're going to be here until 9 o'clock. So let's carry on this conversation and let's see who thinks what. Right. Chris, you stealed my little voting activity here. One thing I wanted to ask from you, is anybody here who is a network engineer but hasn't started doing anything in relation to network automation? Okay, got a couple. It's good. So mainly this presentation is aiming to you, but others may hear some useful thoughts or can relate to colleagues who are not that into this yet. Some myths and doubts. So we're going to walk with Tim today. And Tim is a network engineer. He's like some of you guys. He lives and breathes with the CLI and keeps hearing this term, network automation, and he's got no clue really what that is and what to do with it, but he understands that he kind of doesn't want to miss the boat. And he's under pressure, but kind of paralyzed. So I come to Tim and I say, Tim, are you interested in network automation? And then the first answer that typically I hear in similar conversation is like, yeah, I need to start learning about Python. How many of you, you typically hear this? It's like when network automation comes to the topic, it's like Python straight away. And I would like to bust this myth in the beginning, because network automation is not about Python. Python could be or may be a part of it, but it's not just Python in itself. What network automation, if you want to kind of stir this into the programming side, then network automation requires a different way of thinking, which is a programmatic way of thinking. So before you actually, you say you want to learn Python, no, you need to learn a new mindset, which is a programmatic mindset, in my understanding, and you can argue with me. This is what I believe. Thank you, Chris. So we have a tiny conversation with Tim, and then he gets really excited. Okay, great, I want to start. Where to start? Like, okay, I will go into the internet and will look what I can find. And this is what he gets. Python, Jinja, Ubuntu, Napalm, Tailab, SaltStack, Red Hat, Vagrant, NSX, Git, GitHub, Stackstorm, Ansible, YAML, JSON, SaltStack, Docker, OpenFlow, everything. And then he says, uh-oh, what now? Too much. I've got no clue which one I should pick. What happens if I pick the wrong one? I waste time. What now? So one of the things I hear often is network automation requires knowledge of many different systems that need to work together to deliver the end result. May or not may be true, but definitely you don't have to have 15 different systems to start with. Because many network engineers or used to be network engineers are in the room, I want to play a little game with you. Just go back when you started your career and think about what you went through. You learned about networks, right? But you didn't learn about all the protocols at the same time. You learned about static routing, maybe IP addressing, just do the model, do the framework, SI model, TCP IP model. This is the same thing for network automation. Just nowadays, because the media is just bombarding you with all these catchy terms, especially SDN and all sorts of things that you just don't know where to go. But the similar frameworks exist here, and there are a couple of choices that you cannot go wrong with. If you start learning Python, that's definitely a good choice. If you pick Ansible, that's definitely a good choice. That's my take on this one. Another myth. It would take longer to write a script than doing something manually. Again, depends on the situation. If you haven't done any coding before and you want to solve something with coding, yes, it will take longer because you have to learn a lot of things and you may go down the rabbit holes. But let me tell you a little story. Have you heard the name Gutenberg before? Gutenberg? Johannes Gutenberg. What is he famous for? Printing process. Thank you very much. Yes. Do you know what he did when he invented printing? He took the letters, organized in a way that put some ink on it, pressed page of empty sheet of paper on it. He had a page. Then another piece of paper, put it on it, another page. He printed 180 copies of the Bible in 2 years with this method, with several people. So if, at that time, the people who actually did the books, they handwritten it, probably it would take maybe less time to do it handwritten. But look how printing media evolved. Where are we printing media? So, there was a different way of doing things, which maybe wasn't quicker, but it opened the gates for innovation to optimize this process. And then now, I don't even know what how quickly you can print these things, but this is not a problem anymore. And it led to a revolution because books could be available to multiple people, many people, large-scale printing. Knowledge was flooding between countries easily. So, maybe in the beginning he said, it just takes longer, I'm going to go write it by hand. If he decided to do that, where we would be today? Not here, definitely not here. I doubt. As a beginner, you need to invest time and energy in learning in a tool before you realize that the tool doesn't deliver the results you expected. Yeah. A key term is here in learning, because learning is an investment. And you may want to solve a problem, and let's say you want to do, I should have thought of an example beforehand. You want to do, let's go without the example. You want to do something and then it didn't work how you wanted. But 3 days later, you have another problem, and that you learned 3 days before is exactly the solution that you need it for. So, you learn something, it's not good today, but it may be good tomorrow. And, it gives you experience. So you may learn this, but you eventually can use this much of it. And you're already ahead where you were before. So this is an investment, and there are methods how to get it optimized. Yes, so there are different ways, as you can see. The common thing in these triangles is we're building on networking. So we want to solve networking problems. We want to solve problems in the networking domain. So this assumes that everybody has a substantial knowledge in networks build. And then I'll go with explain the middle one here. So let's say you decide to learn Python. You understand what variables are, what functions are, what sort of libraries available. You may use NetMiko, you may use Napalm to interact with the devices. But at some point you realize it's like, I may want to learn something about Linux. So and you go and learn something about Linux, and learn the basics of Linux, just how to do basic operations, copying files over, that sort of things. And then once you have a bunch of Python scripts written, you're confident in Linux, you realize that it's a little bit scattered around. So I want to organize this a little bit better. I want to have functions that But it's not written by me, somebody else already written it, and it's tested and it's better. So then you may decide to learn about Ansible. And then when all your colleagues realize that, he's doing so cool things, then they want to join and help you as well. You will start put everything into Git, into revisioning, and you help and allow them to collaborate so you can work together and you're not going to be a lonely warrior anymore. But this is just one way. And this is not the only way. So, you can maybe pick up something, pick up Ansible first, share your playbooks. And then when you have a problem that you cannot solve with Ansible, because not all problems can be solved with Ansible, you learn Python and so on. So different variations. The common thing in each of them, you have a Linux distribution in there, you have a language with some libraries, you have a framework, and you have version control. If you pick one of these and you understand them, if you want to do something on the framework later on, it's going to be very easy to pick it up because principles are the same. It's just different implementation. You will solve very similar problems with it. There are obviously common grounds in each framework, and there are some frameworks are better in other stuff than others. Some frameworks are better than others in certain functions. I'm going to share the slides, by the way, so you don't necessarily have to take pictures. Right, so this is the thing that Chris mentioned earlier. Two people, this is Tim still. The other one is Bob. He's a software guy. He likes unconventional solutions. And the doubt that is related to Tim is something that network engineer will never be a true programmer. And kind of, yeah, but they don't necessarily have to be a true programmer. They're not necessarily going to do the same coding design frameworks that a programmer would do, but they need to learn about this principle, the mindset of coding. And then there's another thing, the other doubt, that software engineers will never fully understand networking. And do they have to? They understand well enough and they can talk to Tim. And if Tim learns enough about programming and can talk to Bob, then they eventually come together and form a team. And then the stuff that Tim's good at can share with Bob, and Bob can help Tim to write better code or help him providing frameworks. So my vision of network automation is that these people will team up, and we've got great examples in this room who coming from that side, and you've got more people coming from this side. But eventually, when the good products and good tools are coming out, open source, Napalm is a very good example where you have a software engineer and multiple software engineers working on it and understanding the domain. And they providing really great, useful tools that eventually the team's going to use. So if you want to take on one message from this presentation, I would say just get started if you haven't, because the ship is definitely moving. And the tools out there, the knowledge is out there, plenty of knowledge. Pick one or two popular things and just go with them. And then you will see where the road takes you. And you will find the problems that you want to solve, and then you will be able to find the right solutions for the right tools for that. And don't be afraid to ask questions. There are great forums and communities out there. There's Slack channels, forums, groups. And I hope this platform is going to be one of those eventually. So just ask and start. Thank you. Are there any questions? Questions? Sorry? He asked which programming language I've started learning. So I'm coming from, I've learned programming before I started networking. Probably I was 6 years old when I wrote my first Turbo Pascal coloring line codes. And I did PHP JavaScript when I was about 13, and HTML websites and SQL databases. And then I got into networking and kind of left the whole thing behind. And a couple of years later, I picked up again and kind of I understand where the network engineers are coming from when it says no coding, but I can't really truly understand because I've coded before. Yep. Good.
There is another way to get started, and that's come on our 4-day training course. Priced at a very reasonable cost. I'll be handing out flyers later.
Thank you. That wasn't even a question, though, but anyway. More questions? No. Please, if you just... Oh, there's one. Excellent. Thank you.
So you touch point and your manager touch point in one thing was that can a network engineer learn coding? Can a software programmer learn about networking? And I think talking about the two is incorrect in my opinion.
Okay.
Why? Because there should only be intelligent people with the capacity to adapt. So I think it's erroneous to say, does a network do? So network engineers might suffer from what I call tunnel vision. 10 years looking at a black and green terminal window, and vice versa. Software engineers just looking at code all the time without understanding what's the infrastructure requirements to actually serve you, fit for purpose. So yeah, that's just my take on it. In terms of tools, I'm not a critic, just a call out. I think proper APIs are a part of the future. It should be referenced as a tool to take into account.
Yes, thank you. APIs, yes, I did not touch upon that, and it's a really good thing that you mentioned. Thank you very much. That is obviously what you automate and how you automate does matter, because we could have automated everything by CLI screen scraping 15, 20 years ago, but it would have been a pain, and some people actually did. Pardon? Wait, why you talk? Okay, NetMiko is... I didn't talk about those. Yeah, it really depends on the platform. It really depends on the vendor. Even it depends bit. Yes. Well, good network automation. Yes. Microphone.
Sorry.
Thanks for sharing.
They have not embraced this working. They have not embraced the new way of thinking. They are not moving quickly enough towards API integration in their stack, which is why.
It depends on the platform. If you talk about legacy, then legacy is always a pain. Every single? No.
I have access on all environments that only NSX and ACIs, there are APIs everywhere, and I also have all the ASA. And if you upgrade, because if you upgrade, you have legacy, because you always have legacy, and then you've got new, and then you've got the stages of you have to move out of the legacy to the new. In the new, I've got APIs access to everything, but in the new, I still have an ASA. So now I have to go to Ansible, write my own modules to do some stuff through my API that I'll have to develop. That's what I did yesterday. And the end goal is to be all API, all end-to-end. Completely agree. But you'll still have the legacy. And the legacy stuff, I've done something to Perl, which is bullshit, but you have to then do homegrown counter SSH stuff manually, and then you have to pass text. So that's the old way of automating. To pass text is a pain in the ass.
any programming language.
I agree.
APIs make everything easy. Now I have a developer. I'm the network engineer in this Austin exchange. I have a developer. All I need to tell him is, here's the JSON I'm going to give you. Here's the variables you need to copy paste. That's how I'm the half. So I'm the Tim, and I have a Bob or whatever his name was, and he's doing all that. And as long as you have to find a framework between the two, I don't care how he develops it. I can give him a Word document. Here's the JSON I'll give you. You can copy paste some stuff and close it into the UI. Then you automate the network. If behind the scenes I need him to SSH or something, that's his problem. At the moment, it'll become my problem in the future, but it's his problem right now. But APIs is the end goal.
I completely agree with you.
It is hard to make it.
Several large customers. I know exactly what you're talking about. I completely agree with you. My point was that the statement was APIs are the definitive factor for all automation.
It isn't the only definitive, but it is the end goal. Yeah. Just the estimate that completion and a lot of API should be required. And I agree with you. It should be the end goal. All the industry should converge. Because you can have a philosophy. Implementation like that, just something about NSX. Well, NSX is student starts with suite. If you use Juniper's APIs, which you get to roll out way. So it comes from the last vendor to correctly implement that. That system APIs management. You will not have RESTful API call from one table will not play one table. That's very important because it stems from the class. APIs, buzzwords, you can implement that. 5-day course.
You have an API selection, right?
Sounds like 4 days is a bit ambitious now. I'm rethinking that. So APIs, anyone who's worked with them know they're of variable quality. And one of the things, to your point, with giving a programmer quite often APIs will go return code 200, okay, job done. It's not job done. All it means is it's received something. Okay. So I think there's still a room for domain-specific knowledge, because we've been, Dan and I, we set up a company to do this kind of stuff a couple of years ago, and a lot of the code that we write is in verifying what's happened, making sure that the state is as you expect it to be before you do something, and it's how you expect it to be after. And just poking the API with something doesn't usually do that.
I think that's more of a statement about automation than saying performing task X is network automation. Like, because I'm assuming everyone works in the change control environment. How do you manage your change control process with automation?
Still a human problem, right?
Well, but precisely. Yeah. So in the software world, like in terms of software development lifecycle, we manage that completely automatically. Developer checks in, it gets deployed, it gets tested, it gets deployed to the next environment, it gets tested again, it gets deployed.
We still have to step on the stage where I'm actually ready to change the CAD, and then the whole actual CAD is approved, and the schedule of the task in the window of CAD is approved.
But I think
we're still steps away from that, but we're trying to get to it.
Going back to the first presentation, the biggest thing to take out of that is that automation reduces risk. Because the more time you perform an instruction or a task, the more reliable it is. Your code is self-testing, as far as that's concerned, whether it's Ansible or Python or some other system. And the more time you do it, the more time you set, the more reliable it becomes, and you lower the risk of your challenge. That's exactly, I think we've done that with pretty significantly large customers. And my fault there.
We've still got some use to that.
And you increase the throughput of your operations team. That's kind of where I was going with my statement earlier about not giving the guy access. It's about de-skilling tasks so that engineers can be freed up to work on more interesting things, like the bigger problems, like how do we redistribute BGP across our entire global infrastructure, or whatever, another statement. While you've got Jimmy sitting in the call center who can now actually change switchboard configurations using Ansible Tower because he doesn't need to log into a device, just press the button alert. Oh, and by the way, it automatically raises the change, closes it down afterwards, and gives you post-implementation checks, sends an email to everybody who's involved, and you've not had to touch it.
We have done that kind of thing in a tier 1 bank and PCI regulated environment where we auto raise the ticket, we check that it's approved. If it all goes correctly, you close the ticket and push it all through its various stages. So that is possible. But yeah, it takes, the organisation has to be happy with that happening. So they have to be happy that this is a standard change that can go through like that.
And a lot of this will come down to mindset, right? It's just the mindset of the business, right? If the business is not happy, assuming that automated tasks. In theory, the ideal goal of automation is that you should be able to push something at any time of the day and achieve the same result, right? And a lot of these financial institutions are still not there because there's still these legacy mindsets that a change has an impact associated with it, right? And so it's not just about learning automation, it's about a process, it's about a mindset change, a cultural shift within a business, right?
Yeah, that's because when I do changes, they do have an impact. A very bad one.
I think the way that we approached this when we were in the requirements gathering phase, the biggest customer we worked with was to look at low-hanging fruit. So we were looking at switchboard changes, like telephone changes, DNS changes, very simple operations that for some reason were taking people in the call center days to complete. And because they're relatively low risk, they're very quick to perform, and they're much more process oriented than sort of being a technician. They're trying to like update DNS. I mean, people trying to do that. But they've got to fail to jump through all these hoops as far as your change management is concerned, approval process, blah, 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 blah. And if you can automate that, you've already done 80% of the work by automating the process around the technical aspect. And, oh, by the way, we've also proved that it works as a risk reduction because we can calculate the risk, blah, 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 using whatever framework we've got. And that was what led us on to performing larger and larger changes in the more critical parts of the infrastructure. So we went from like touching some of the devices, 60,000 lines of routing config checkout afterwards, which no human could do in the time frame which we did, like 2 hours. Yeah. And once you prove what you're doing is reliable, using low-hanging fruit examples, it becomes a lot easier to justify things like that.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? Then I'm going to hand it over to Lucia.